What is up, guys? Patrick here from NintenTalk, back with another discussion video, kind of more of a scenario video today, and the scenario is, should Nintendo acquire Playtonic Games? Now, for those of you who don't know, Playtonic Games, it's kind of an interesting story because Playtonic Games is the offspring of a much larger game development company, and that is Rareware. Now, Rareware, just to give you youngins a little bit of a lesson, Rareware was kind of like a second party for Nintendo. They made a ton of classic, just fantastic games, starting with some NES games, RC Pro-Am, then going to more of the Super Nintendo with the Donkey Kong Country series, and then I think personally where they made their mark in gaming history was on the N64. I mean, the N64 was packed full of Rare games, and you've probably played some yourself. Conker's Bad Fur Day, Banjo and Kazooie. We had Diddy Kong Racing, Perfect Dark, GoldenEye 007, Battletoads, which was earlier, Star Fox Adventures, just so many good quality N64 games were made by Rareware. Rareware was kind of a sad story because in 2002, Microsoft acquired Rare, and Rare continued to make games. Now, the quality of the games for Microsoft slowly went down. I mean, they made Perfect Dark Zero, which really wasn't received that well. Viva Pinata, which I actually liked quite a bit. I think that was one of their more successful games that they made over there. Cameo, which was all right, and they then started to work heavily on Kinect games. When motion control was the big thing, they worked on a lot of the Kinect sports games for the Xbox. And then most recently, they've made Sea of Thieves, which I think is probably the biggest thing that they've done since the Kinect games. And the Kinect, really didn't catch on like they would have hoped. But in 2012, a team kind of disbanded from Rare, and they kind of made their own project. And in 2014, it became official that Playtonic Games was the offspring of that. And they kind of just have this big idea, and they actually started a Kickstarter, and they were calling it a spiritual successor to the Banjo-Kazooie franchise titled Yooka-Laylee. And Yooka-Laylee was one of the biggest crowdfunded projects to date, raising over $2 million in the process from over 80,000 backers. And if you aren't just staggered by those numbers, it speaks volume to that audience. How much, I think we could safely say mostly Nintendo fans, I think, were backing this, but just everyone that lived in, the early to late 90s experienced all the greatness that Rare had, and Playtonic Games was, comprised of a ton of the people over at Rare. If we're talking more modern, why should Nintendo acquire Playtonic Games? They should acquire them because the whole reason Playtonic Games was even made was because people at Rare were uninspired. They weren't making the games that they wanted to make. Obviously, they were, kind of put into a corner and said, hey, make these Kinect games, make these, sequels to games. And the sequels that were coming out were very, very uninspired. I mean, Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts is nothing like the old Banjo-Kazooie series. And Perfect Dark Zero lost a lot of that lust and lost a lot of that, just great gameplay that the first Perfect Dark had. It just seemed like Rare was just an uninspired company. So Playtonic Games is not just the team that, quote unquote, made the new Banjo-Kazooie game. This team is by far one of the most talented indie development teams that are out there. Just to list a few of the people, Chris Sutherland, project director and software engineer for Playtonic Games, was responsible for building the mechanics of some of the greatest games made by Rare. He's even the voice of some of the characters in Banjo-Kazooie. Gavin Price, which is the managing director and creative lead, worked on games like Banjo-Kazooie, Grabbed by the Ghoulies, Viva Pinata, and some of the Kinect sports games. Steve Males, the character art director, he created stars like Banjo-Kazooie and some of the Donkey Kong Country series. I think an important one, if we go down the list, is Jens Reisteimer. He's the technical director and software engineer currently for Playtonic Games, and he was in charge of executing handheld ports of the likes of Donkey Kong Country. So altogether, and this I found was a staggering statistic, Playtonic Games has over 100 years of experience making games for Rare. So essentially, if you're Nintendo and you see this indie development team, I'm betting that they're a lot cheaper than acquiring Rare back. And at this point, you have to ask yourself, should we even acquire Rare? Like, what is really left of Rare? I mean, I just listed about three or four people that are on Playtonic. I could have gone down the list still. I mean, there are tons of people that worked on Banjo-Kazooie, DK64, a lot of the Donkey Kong Country series. There's just a ton of talent at Playtonic, and I think that they would be a lot easier to acquire from Nintendo. And I honestly think that the vision of Playtonic is more so in Nintendo's, the old path that Nintendo had for Rare back in the day. You might be saying to yourself, well, why don't you just go for Rare and you get all those properties? You get to make Banjo-Kazooie games again. You get to make Perfect Dark games again. There's a ton of IPs that Rare still controls. Now, that is true. But like I said before, what would you really be getting if you acquired Rare again? I mean, there are some original members still with the company, and yes, it is a very, very talented company. Sea of Thieves just came out, and that game is really, really good. I mean, it didn't catch on, I think, to the heights that they wanted, but still, I mean, Sea of Thieves is a really just cool game, and that just reminded me when I was playing it. It reminded me of old Rare, which is something that I haven't seen. So I think Playtonic Games would be a great company for Nintendo to acquire. If we're talking about the only game that Playtonic has made in Yooka-Laylee, I mean, it wasn't a game of the year contender. It wasn't that big of a success, but just to see everyone behind this idea of, hey, it's 2018, why don't we bring in a collectathon 3D platformer, is just staggering. That, a lot of people say that genre is dated in a way, and to get that much support from, the gaming community is just crazy. And for those of you who have played Banjo-Kazooie, you can definitely see the old Rare coming back out in this brand new indie development studio. So let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Would it be wise for Nintendo to go early in and acquire Playtonic Games? I think so. I think it's a good risk. I mean, some risk, but I think the reward is the thing that you have to look at. So thank you guys once again. This is Patrick from NintenTalk. Let me know what you think in the comments section below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.